Peter, I am waiting with some eagerness to get the results from the 1st District, Congressional District in New Hampshire, because there's a man named Robert Smith, a Republican, running there, and his campaign device is to go door to door, giving people copies of the Constitution and of a cookbook written by his wife. He is appealing to 2 deeply treasured American values, freedom and a full stomach.
Well, Strom Thurmond does that, too. Has done that in a number of his campaigns. Goes out with his family and campaigns along the road, giving out family recipes. So maybe it's a way to victory.
Maybe so. We'll find out. In the meantime, we're going to the, what did you call it? What does it all mean department? With Barbara Walters, George Will, and Tom Wicker. Would you all come in and tell us what you think? What does this mean over a longer term than tonight or next week? Barbara?
Well, if we talk about the historical implications beyond who wins or loses, I mean, what are our grandchildren going to read? Let me start off with what I think are 3, even though the first one may seem obvious. We just heard Bert Lance a few minutes ago with his new saying, pioneers get all the arrows, perhaps talking about Geraldine Ferraro. But pioneers also create breakthroughs. And what has happened, whether she wins or loses, is that a woman on the ticket is no longer a barrier. It may not be an asset, but you can now have a woman on the vice presidential and perhaps even the presidential ticket. I think that's 1. Number 2, Jesse Jackson. A year ago, I don't think anybody, not anybody, but a few people took his candidacy seriously. Now he is the first serious black candidate, and he's had an effect. And I think 3, if, as the polls suggest, youth, especially the first-time voters, are going for Reagan and the Republicans and are becoming conservative instead of Democratic and liberal, as most youth, with the exception probably of George, were, that says something. That's historical.
Well, it certainly is. I think that one of the things that's impressed me in this campaign, I've been watching presidential elections fairly closely, personally, since 1960. And I think this campaign represents the full flowering, if that's the word, of the instrument of television in politics. And I don't mean just the interviews that reporters conduct on television, or even the paid advertising. I mean the whole thing, the medium. And it seems to me that almost all the important consequences that are going to flow out of this election really flow from television. Television, in that sense now, is the new political reality in the country. And what people see on the screen is what they make up their minds and vote on. I think far more so than the actual reality that may surround them in their lives. And almost everything we've heard here tonight about startling developments and so forth has to do with television. It has to do with, particularly with the fact that the Republicans are so adept at producing really vital television programs that catch people's imagination, that President Reagan is perhaps as skilled a performer on television as we've ever seen, or maybe ever will see. I think that television has become the instrument that really dominates our politics, and that's true, I think, beyond parties and beyond issues.
Barbara, I think the problem is that the country is a middle-class country, and the Democratic Party has lost the knack of addressing the middle class. I'll give you an anecdote. When Governor Cuomo finished his speech in San Francisco Convention about the poverty and the suffering in the country, an aide to Governor Cuomo called his father, a blue-collar worker in upstate New York, and said, "Dad, what did you think of that?" And the father said, "Son, the Democratic Party made me middle class with student loans, GI Bill, all kinds of help. The Democratic Party made me middle class. The Republican Party may keep me middle class." There's a sense now in which the Republican Party seems to serve the interests of a middle class that was created in no small measure and made prosperous and secure and confident by Democratic Party programs. It's a paradox.
That's going to stay for quite a while, or is that something that is
Well, the Democratic Party has shown itself over the last 4 elections to be a very slow learner, and so it may take them some more elections to get a new vocabulary.
Well, that's what we think of the historical implications. We have a lot more. If you'll come back with us, we can reel off a few more as the evening goes on. But I'm sure that you two have, David, that you have your own list.
Well, thank you, Barbara and George and Tom. We'll be back to you with some more hard questions before the evening is over. On the, George was talking about, interesting as always, talking about Mario Cuomo's speech at the Republican convention and his father calling him, was it his father? About the middle class. Right. It's very hard to make a spicy, sexy political speech about the middle class. It is much more effective, as Cuomo showed us, to talk about the poor, people who are in need and who are being neglected. It causes an emotional response. To talk about people who are working and doing okay and have a Chevrolet and a Plymouth or something and a house with a carport. There's nothing really very exciting about it. I'd hate to have to make a speech about the middle class.
But you know, you remind me, David, that I think one of the really interesting things we're going to be looking for tonight is, in a sense, the opposite end of that scale. Not so much class, but age. I want to see what the young have done tonight. I think 10 years ago in the last election, even in this country, you'd have seen young people all over the country. You would not have seen the Republican clubs all over the place. To see a Republican turnout for Ronald Reagan at Berkeley in California is a great surprise to a great many people in this country. And if Ronald Reagan picks up as much of the young vote, and especially in, you know, the late 20s and early 30s, it may be that the generation of Democrats people thought they were raising were really a generation of Republicans.
Well, if a Republican group had appeared on the Berkeley campus back in the days of the 60 Rats, I think I might have feared for their safety.
Exactly.
In the days when they were burning flags and listening to Professor Marcuse. I'm not sure they existed. If they did, they probably stayed out of sight. Anyway, we have a lot of projections coming up when more polls close, and very shortly. And that's the national election picture at 52 minutes past the hour.